Well, welcome everybody to our ESN conversation, Emerging Scholars Network. My name is Bob Truby, and I serve as the National Director of the Emerging Scholars Network, which is a ministry of equipping and encouraging developing scholars who follow Jesus together. Even before the COVID pandemic, mental health professionals were seeing a rising demand for their services. The pandemic brought a significant increase to those numbers. Uh, One person that I was in touch with at UCLA, working with their counseling centers, said that they were expecting a 50% increase in their counseling loads and instead saw a 100% increase. Uh, this has resulted in long wait lists to see counselors and an increasing risk of counselor burnout. Our guests today's Our guests today are Christian mental health professionals who are both concerned by these trends and believe the church has an opportunity to help us address this crisis. Now, before we begin, I'll just take care of a couple of housekeeping details. One is we just want to let you know that today's conversation is recorded. And if would prefer not to be recorded or photographed, leave your mic muted and disable your video. By continuing to participate in the conversation with either video or audio enabled after the recording begins, you consent to allow InterVarsity to use the recording and any of our screenshots for InterVarsity ministry purposes. I'll stop the recording for just a moment so that you can adjust your video and audio settings if you wish to. And let me just adjust one thing. So it's really my pleasure today to introduce our speakers. Both James N. Sells has his PhD from the University of Southern California and is a professor of counseling, sharing the Rosemary S. Hughes Professor of Christian Thought and Mental Health Chair at Regent University. He also co-directs the Caris Institute at Regent University. He's a licensed psychologist, and his books include Family Therapies and Beyond the Clinical Hour. Our other guest, Amy Trout, has a doctorate of psychology from Wheaton College, and she is the founder and executive director of a private practice, Cornerstone Consultants, which does both direct clinical care and is involved in a pioneering ministry in clinician-church collaboration. She was previously the Associate Professor of Counseling Ministries at Regent University. They're here to talk today about a new book that they have out, along with co-author Heather Sells, Jim's wife, and we're very happy that you could join us. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Okay, and I'll just remind you that you'll need to unmute your mics if you haven't already done so.
Got it, done so.
All right, great. Now we can all hear each other. Okay, as I mentioned in my introduction, there's been a lot of discussion about the mental health crisis today. I wonder if you could share a little bit about how bad it is from your perspective and any thoughts as to what's contributing to this.
Okay, I'll go first. It's a privilege to be here. Thanks so much for hosting this and for engaging in conversation. Certainly, COVID has accelerated the mental health prevalence, but the data suggests over the past 25 years, even longer, we've seen steady increases in really every category of diagnostic experiences. So the curve got steeper during COVID, but it was already a pretty rapid climb and raising concerns long before COVID. The cause is multiple, coming from a broad sense of disenfranchisement from others, a breakdown of community and relational structures. So obviously the spiritual component, we see that playing a role, and the degree of stress of 20th century society. It certainly could play a role. So many factors are pressing on families, pressing on couples, pressing on individuals that makes the greater prominence of mental health symptoms emerge. Amy, what are your thoughts in addition to that?
Yeah, I think also we, as a society, I believe that the problems are actually growing, but we're also talking about it more.
Yeah.
So maybe, maybe our grandparents struggled with depression, but I sure never saw it. It just wasn't something that was as openly discussed and as easily identified by symptoms. So I think there's kind of both going on. The prevalence is definitely rising, but also so is the identification of there's a problem here, and people are talking more, especially the younger generation. They're sharing like none of us ever had access to through multiple means, but right on this thing. They're very savvy with understanding, or at least attempting to understand or share what their struggles are. And I'm sure that maybe is dual pronged, maybe it helps identify some real problems, and maybe it also kind of helps people start looking like, at things that may or may not be problematic. Who knows? But yeah, the problem is growing. People are struggling more than ever before.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what certainly I get a sense as well. I mean, and it is interesting. I mean, I see nightly messaging on our TV channels about beating the stigma of mental health, kind of in a game show format, that seems to be messaging that, hey, look, we don't have to be ashamed to talk about these things, which I think I sense does contribute. Well, tell me, you talk about the challenge of meeting the growing demand for mental health care from the mental health profession alone. What would it take to meet the rising demand that we're seeing?
We use the phrase, it will take millions to attend to the needs of millions.
Wow.
And so with that idea is the profession of mental health care in all of its facets: psychiatry, psychology, marriage and family, social work, counseling, addictions. They are extremely effective, but it's impossible to meet the need at the professional level with the number of people who are expressing the need. And the system that we have in mental health care is extremely time consuming and expensive, if indeed the clinical hour is the primary means by which we are attending to mental health needs across the population. So that's our thought around the role of the church, because in the church there's an average of 8 churches in every zip code. There's a community within reach of every person who it has some commitment to the kind of pain that every person is experiencing. Every person is in reach of a church where someone has been affected by suicide, someone has been affected by trauma, by abuse. There's a host of people within reach, but they lack coordination and organization and training, and the insight that yes, they actually can practice the hospitality that the church has designed.
Well, you've mentioned the significant aspect of your book, which is moving beyond the clinical hour and beyond the current models of just professional care to involving churches in a collaborative role. I wonder if you'd outline for us some of what you proposed in the book, and maybe you and Amy both can.
Yeah, have at it, Amy.
Yeah, it really can look just as unique as any community church is unique. So each church has its own mission, its own vision, what it wants to be about. So as far as specific programmings or specific applications, they can be tailored and custom fit, and should be tailored and custom fit to align with the identity of that church and the way that they envision caring for their community. But in a general sense, the church is full of kind-hearted, loving people, predominantly, who've been to the other side of some hard situations, and who love God and love others, and want to do great care for people. And so if you just start with that, ways to support people care, there are so many. I mean, from developing just caregiving ministry training and input, maybe a little bit larger. I'll tell you a story about a church I work with. A care volunteer came to a Monday staff meeting and said that, she was bothered because someone, came into the prayer room after service and was suicidal, and she prayed with her and tried to talk to her, but she let her go. And she says, gosh, I just wonder if I should have done more. I'm worried about her.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect example of, there was no specific training in place for how to handle certain instances that could definitely be haunting in reflection later. And so we developed a training protocol and an outline and some steps and, some safety measures for people in that specific circumstance. But those kinds of examples, triaging systems for, the care team, what is a little too big for maybe what we can do, but how can we also provide wraparound and a continuum of care while someone might be, off to the professional as well? How do we still remain their community and giving them support? And how do we become that safe place for them to come back and land, not even come back and land, but just stay with us after their therapy time has ended? So those are some beautiful examples, I think, that come to mind from just a people care perspective. Listening skills, training on attending, training on, how to really be present with a person and to be slow to speak. I think sometimes in ministry, and I've been there myself, it can be very easy to, oh, I got a verse for that, kind of throw something out there to sort of feel better. And is it, if it's inspired by the Holy Spirit, great, give the verse. But you know what I mean? Like just holding back and listening well, listening without fear or anxiety inside of you as the listener, trying to connect on a deep level, trying to hear maybe what's under the content that they're saying, how to sort of pull out more, and really get to a point of assessing people's needs in a way that's a little bit deeper, so that they can apply a type of a triaging model as needed. So those are some of my initial ideas, Jim.
Yeah. I was looking at Acts chapter 20 today, and wrote down this verse: pay careful attention to yourselves and to all of the flock in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, to care for the church of God, which he obtained with his own blood. And that the role that the church has in providing the community of hospital care in our world, that the word hospice has been transformed into a place where you go to die, and a hospital, the place where you go to be sick physically. But in the New Testament, the concept of hospitality was attending to the need, whatever it happened to have been. It's not that I throw a great dinner party. They had such hospitable gifts, but rather I am capable and willing to stand with you in your pain. And that was the primary evangelism tool of the early church, particularly in the Dark Ages, in which plagues wreaked havoc on cities and the church state. So that concept of the church's job the people of the church, our job is to attend to the needs, to be present in the needs of others.
One of the things, I know I've sensed with some churches a real hesitancy in general toward whether it's toward academic, any kind of academic discipline. They almost think that, there's often a thinking that this is anti-God or whatever. And I know that's been true of psychology. That there's sometimes been concerns about psychology as being pretty anti-Christian or oppositional to religious life. And I think I wanted to ask you what you see as needed to overcome that kind of hesitancy and to foster a real collaboration that's a partnership between clinicians and churches.
I think it really takes, the Christian clinicians that have the heart to do this kind of work, to avail themselves, particularly, beginning with their own faith community. I do remember when I started out studying, psychology, and if I brought up, I was, at a state university, if I brought up anything about my faith, it was quickly shot down. And then the tides turned a little, right? But likewise in my church, if I brought up anything about psychology, I was quickly shot down as well. So thankfully, I feel like there's more space for both dialogues to happen. Maybe within the psychological realm, it's more appropriate to say spirituality, supporting a client's spirituality. But regardless, I feel like the charge is really for Christian clinicians who feel inspired, or who feel like they want to help support the work of the church through their training and skills, to take it out to their bodies. And I think of it as a movement, right? Like that, if the Christian clinicians that are so inspired take charge of this, there's tends to be a ripple effect. One church will hear about what they're doing and kind of reach out, and some relationships can be forged. And, it just more of a kind of grassroots type idea on my end.
Yeah. I love that the very question reflects the condition of the culture that, as a family psychologist, that's what I'm trained to do. I'm trained to step into a dysfunctional system and not get caught into the dysfunction and promote a healing. So in this case, we have two people who can't get along. In fact, that's the metaphor we use in the book of it's a family divorce, in which our theological parents, our Christian faith, are divorced now from our theoretical parents, our psychology, or our mental health theory. And we have to learn to live with both parents. So I love interacting on the Christian side with men and women who are committed to this idea, in maybe even an exclusionary biblical counseling perspective that doesn't want psychology. Like, great, let me help you do this more effectively in terms of how to organize your ministry within your church. You can do a really good thing. And to the other churches that want to be more collaborative with psychology, great. We can help you create excellence in the way you do this ministry. So that was Amy's idea at the very beginning. There are so many ways that this needs to be done, and we don't want to get caught in you have to do it this way. No, we just have to do it. And there are an abundance of ways, and we don't want to project the same kind of rigidity in controlling people. No, let's think about how you can be blessings to others that are in your care, that God has brought into your world, and you don't have to follow our model.
Well, because a model would fall short, right?
Yeah,
like I could give you a model that I use in my faith community, but it's my faith community. It has its own DNA, so we want to be very respectful to be, I guess, individualistically system-centered, right? So we understand the culture and the community, and then we can respond with interventions that fit that community and are highly respectful without coming in with our preconceived notions of, oh, I heard this is good to do in a church.
That's a
Not
killer
what
right
this is
there.
about.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. And I like the grassroots up approach that you're taking to this in many ways of working with local communities and allowing that to spread as others see what's happening and hear the stories. I wonder if you might talk a little bit more, and I know you spent a significant part of your book talking about how to heal this divorce between Christian faith and clinical professional work. And I wonder if you might talk a little bit more about how you bring healing in that and how you see the two. You know, you talk about integration and what that means for you.
Yeah. I think the healing comes in not trying to quote unify mom and dad to get back together again, but to acknowledge and give legitimacy to mom and give legitimacy to dad.
Okay.
And I uh, I am not compelled to be the one who restores the breach. I am compelled to attend to each one of those parents faithfully and legitimately. Parents being both my Christian faith and my professional discipline. And so I can be congruent in having relationship with one while engaging with the other.
Hmm.
And and if and I have to cling to that very tightly. So, Amy, you want to follow up before we go to the second half of Bob's question?
Yeah, what I've found is every pastor or ministry leader that I have spoken to, whether or not I have worked with a church recently that was still overall quite closed to mental health care, but whether or not they, wherever they were at on the continuum of their, their trust and valuation for mental health as a profession, I have not found one person in the ministry that wasn't either personally affected by a major mental health condition or had a close family member or a close friend. Like, it's so everywhere right now, like 1 in 5, right? So, I mean, it's kind of hard to say, yeah, we don't really need this. I don't know anyone that's doing that. And even the church that was really close to it, the pastor came to me because they had struggled personally for years in silence, got psychiatric support, had counseling support, but couldn't speak freely about mental health to the body because the body was not open to it at all. And so they hosted seminars that discussed starting with the spiritual, we used verses, we used Bible verses, but the biological, the psychological, the sociocultural, and the spiritual influences on us as people, and the ways that and what a powerful event this was. This is a yearly event that we did for a few years. And now this whole the church has transformed. They're one of the mental health really champions in the community now. But this was a church where the pastor themselves was so stuck in silence because the ethos of the church was, if they're struggling in that way, they got to get closer to God. They got to get rid of the sin. They're not praying, whatever it is. Yeah. And they couldn't turn the tide. So there's probably still some resistance out there in certain pockets, especially, different cultural communities and whatnot, but it doesn't take long. You don't have to look far behind you. If you haven't struggled yourself or had someone under your roof that has had some significant challenges with their own emotional wellness, my guess is you have at work, or your spouse has had a friend, or your neighbor, it's close. It's close to all of us. It's too close to all of us.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to Actually, we probably should take a break here and let people know about the book that you've written, which is Beyond the Clinical Hour. I'm going to put something up on the screen here. So the book we've been talking about is Beyond the Clinical Hour, which can be purchased at InterVarsity Press for a 25% discount with free shipping using the code IVP ESN at the checkout. And you can use that discount will be good through May 22nd. And one of the neat things about it is you can order other books there and apply that discount to your whole order. I also would just mention, and that's not on the screen, but right now, all of InterVarsity Press's ebooks are available at 50% off at Amazon. So, you can get a print copy for 25% or an ebook for 50% off if you follow those kinds of things. So, with that, and let me drop that link into the chat here. Okay. And I would invite our audience here to, if any of you have questions that you'd like to ask, we'd really love to get those in. While we're maybe waiting for the first audience question, one of the questions I'll ask you is, I think a concern that some might have hearing about your proposal of involving churches is that you have a lot of well-intentioned, caring people, but if they're, you know, they don't have the kind of training that you do, and they could unintentionally cause harm to people. And how do you address that in the work that you do with churches?
I think it's really important to remember that they're already doing work with people. You know,
Yeah,
people care is
that's right.
happening.
That's right.
And so what we're trying to do is make it even better, you know, make it even more
That's good.
targeted, more aligned, you know, with what they're facing, helping people that are the caregivers to have a place to really intentionally debrief, to receive additional supports, to ask follow-up questions. So that like secondary layer of support over the caregiver as well. And then I really do believe, you know, we unfortunately, you know, we're not going to work ourselves out of jobs here. So people will be referring to, you know, but helping them understand when. And again, you know, perhaps the churches is the caregiving role is for the people that need additional care, being that wraparound care, that community base of support that is consistent, that's not necessarily limited to an hour a week, but that is more user-friendly, more hands-on, more present, more accessible, and a different flavor of care embedded, you know, within that church community. So it's not to say that it's a replacement, but it's also not to say that it is secondary care. It's they're primary caregiver. They're on the front line of care. You know, the church is having people come to them 24/7, and they're responsive at you know, almost the same rate. So we want to support. I always think of the metaphor of like Moses and Aaron and Hur holding up his arms. I want to be an arm holder for the frontline workers. Like I want to be an arm holder for those in ministry. It's so important to me because they're the ones that are dealing with way more than what a typical clinician schedule or structure looks like, more in volume and more in frequency. Understanding when to refer someone is super important, but also realizing some people are not going to follow up on those referrals. And so what then? How then do you speak? Because that's a real issue that's come up quite a few times. People will get referred for I mean, that I've seen, you know, people get referred for professional care and they just don't go.
Mhm.
So then what does the church do? Because they still have the person that has the need. And so then you're really working to try to shore up, you know, resources as best as you can, get them plugged in, try to figure out why they're not going, but, you know, helping people try to assess that.
Yeah.
Is there a financial need? Is there a stigma? Is it, what exactly is it? Are there better resources in the community for them? Really kind of being a, someone that gathers, you know, all the colors on the palette of what can be offered to people.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the location, maybe it's the setting, maybe they need a group, maybe, you know, they're so really kind of pulling for more and trying to figure out how to get people the best care that they will receive.
There is in my um, in my age group, there are three dominant media metaphors in television. In the realm of comedy that reflect a vision, a longing for culture from the culture. That comedy series Seinfeld, Friends, and Cheers. All three of them reflect the same storyline. There's a community of people who gather, oddly, it seems, daily. And there's an open door policy with all of them. We have complete access to one another. And it is from this direct community that I draw my life. And there is something totally absurd about that in real time because healthy people don't hang out at bars like they do at Cheers, and our friendships, uh, uh, six single adult friends living in kind of a uh, a philos relationship of brotherly kindness and support that doesn't really exist in real time, but that's our longing that people will know us, people will know our name, people will be so familiar to us that you don't even have to knock to enter their apartment. You just slide in like Kramer sliding into Seinfeld. Uh, so
Wow.
like, what is the church's role? The church plays actually has the capacity to play the real source of friendship, the real source of community, by which all the other pains in life can be uh, allocated, can be uh, resourced, can be referred, can be like we can help you reach or find the resources you need. Um, Come here and have a seat. Uh, that has been the call of the church, and we are wanting the realm of mental health to be a primary means by which the church does its work.
Yeah, I was struck, you know, what you're mentioning about communities and how the role that these supportive groups can play.
Mhm. Mhm.
I know we had an event recently with Kurt Thompson at Ohio State, and Kurt was speaking about how, as part of their work, they work at creating and incorporating people into confessional communities,
Yeah.
where you know, alongside the clinical time that they have. They just found those confessional communities very, very important in people's
Yeah.
uh, uh, well-being and
Yeah.
growth. Yeah. Um, well, I do want to make sure to invite our audience. We're not getting a lot of questions today, and we would love for you to join if there are things that you're wondering about of some of the things that have been proposed here.
Mhm.
One of the things I did want to ask you about was the question of you know, at least some of the people either who are watching this live or who will watch the recording later are from working in academic settings,
Mhm.
universities, colleges, and so forth. And oftentimes they're in the front lines of encountering people with mental health needs. What
Mhm.
are some of the ways that the collaborative model that you're proposing might work or might function in that setting? And both of you have been either are or have been in academic settings, probably yourselves have had this kind of experience.
Yeah, I think the referral as a professor, where the referral of one of my students to the counseling center at the university uh, is not an offloading task. Uh, it's a participatory task, so that I want to make sure that this person goes to the place that they need to go to get the direct help. And by the fact that they have come to me, suggests the invitation for some type of ongoing relationship in whatever academic structure is appropriate for the context that that's operating in. So that's the nature of academic mentoring, and I would encourage anybody in that context to, if you're a professor and you're attending to those kinds of needs, to then follow up with those students as is appropriate within the boundaries of the academic structure, but to the nature of the academy was the place where we share life together, and we would, in historic academies, we would dine together, and there would be much a willingness to engage in the development of the person. What are your thoughts, Aim?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it really obviously depends on the student. And, there some students, I recall, we identified them not because they came to us necessarily. So, but whomever is in the closest like relationship with the student in the academic world, I think that's really important to invite follow up if the student requests that. Let them know that you care about them. It's not a punitive measure to send them or to refer them or to at some points require them to go to a professional for care, but that it's based in a genuine care for them as people and for their functioning. And I think if that message can get communicated, that's pretty powerful. I think sometimes students can take that as as a blow to who they are. Again, if they didn't come to you directly and open up, but if you can express that continued care and be part of that continuum in an appropriate way, I think that's important. Supportive, respectful, supportive care.
I know in the setting that I worked in at Ohio State, we actually had people from the counseling center who were working with suicide prevention, for example, come and offer our campus ministers group a training, because they recognized that we actually had contact with a substantial part of the student body, and could really serve in a sense as gatekeepers, recognizing students who are really in trouble and being part of the university's efforts at suicide prevention.
Yeah.
Any of those preventative outreach efforts, I think, are so important and sorely needed on campus, because you may catch something before it becomes a bigger problem.
So I mean, they gave us, so we went through a training, trainings with them, and I would say that many academic settings probably would welcome the opportunity to do those kinds of work with faith communities on campuses. At least certainly our campus did. And this was a public university in a secular setting, but they really recognized us as allies in their efforts, and a real support. And so it was, and they even gave us little cards that we could carry that had some basic, just a basic rubric of really, as we engaged with somebody, that we could really follow through with. So, and a lot of referral resources and so forth. Speaking of that, let me ask you, okay, so I'm in a church where I'd like to do more. We'd like to do more and get more help in this area. Where do I go? Is there Is there a clearinghouse? Is it just trying to find somebody who's doing this kind of work locally? Is there a way, where would you send people who want more help with doing this, who are ready to explore these kind of collaborations?
Good, Ed. That's a great question. Amy, share
Yes.
your list and I'll share my list. And let's see how close or I think our lists are going to be very diverse because there's a lot of places to go.
And if you have
So,
any, and if there's anything you can put in the chat while the others
sure.
talk, that would be great too.
Well, also, I just think that, really starting with the natural organic relationships is ideally where you start. So if you were on the church leadership team and wanted to bring in some consultation from a mental health professional, I would say go with who you know, go with who you know and who you trust already. There could likely be people within your congregation. Start having the conversations there, because it's going to be very meaningful and powerful. And there's going to be such a shared vision for that community, for that congregation, if you can draw from people that are either intricately involved in that community or closely involved. So I really don't want to minimize the role of genuine relationship in forging these connections. I think that is the ideal place to start. Or if you're a mental health professional and you want to do this work with churches, I wouldn't say, never really think of this as a way to build up your practice, but think of the places that you're naturally involved in and that you want to give back and that you want to engage because you want to see them flourish because you have a vested interest in that particular community. So I would always say, start with home. Jim, I'll let you go with your list.
Yeah. Then I'm just typing one more and then I'll speak as I go.
And Amy, you can start jumping in and putting any ones you want to add in there too. It'd be great.
So
Offer
I just
resources
mentioned a
for
few,
folks.
for example, the Boone Center for the Family out of Pepperdine has they've taken a Lilly Foundation grant to create resources for the church, and there's some just rich that are available, manuals and videos available at like nominal cost, like $2, that kind of 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 affordability. Likewise, any family that in your resource that has particular challenges with children, out of not far from where you are, Bob, out of Cleveland is Key Ministries with psychiatrist Steve Gersevich that has created some wonderful resources for attention to families around mental health and within the church. And I mentioned a few more. A project that I'm working on right now, the Church Cares, is looking to build out training programs within churches. So I think Saddleback has an abundance of ministries that they are trying to export, as in Celebrate Recovery is their like flagship ministry for addictions, but it's not just chemical addictions. It's a host of things that capture and captivate and control us that we're trying to break free from. So that actually, what you're talking about, was my wife's job in the writing of the book, because she is a journalist and she just went and interviewed people and took stories of effective ministries that are ongoing within the church community.
Hey, we had a question come in, and I want to make sure we get this in before we start our wrap here. We had a question from somebody saying, what advice would you give to somebody starting a graduate program in counseling?
If you're interested in this work, is that, yeah?
Yeah.
I would say start talking to your church. Start building relationships with your pastor and asking, what their needs are, ways that you could maybe learn what kind of research or things you need to kind of be seeking out to help support the work that they're doing within their communities. And then if this is a real passion area for you, really kind of honing in your own research line, from early on about ways to work with the church, within the church, alongside the church to support the church, and see what's been done, but also kind of dream big and talk to people that are in the church community.
Yeah. I love what you said, Amy. Yeah. The kind of like the question, why did from the great bank robber of the Prohibition era, why do we rob banks? Well, it's because that's where the money is. And why we why are we seeking to work with churches? Because that's where the people are. And that's the such a great access point into the community. Churches still are the primary entry point to the mental health field, regardless of whether they're a church member or not. People seek pastors before that, seek clergy, seek priests, seek rabbis before they will seek a medical or a professional mental health clinician, because they're safer. And it's a suggestion of help me with my life. Don't diagnose me with having a bad brain, because I kind of can't recover from that one. So to the degree that churches and professionals can collaborate, we will both be more effective.
Well, hey, it's come to the time where we want to take a little bit of time to wrap up, and we want to give you kind of your final word. Any suggestions, any kind of final encouragements that you want to share with our audience?
So I am somewhat stunned, surprised, shocked at in writing this book. I had no idea how easy it would be to talk to people about the needs that exist within their families. It's like every person, every pastor that I have spoken with has been, oh, we've needed this for so long. I don't know what to do. One pastor I spoke to recently, he leads a very small congregation of 150 people. And he said, I've documented the last 18 months, I have had 500 calls asking for care within my community. And that's coming at an average about one a day. And because I have nowhere to go, and I'm just overwhelmed and burned out with what to do here. Can you help? So that's where we are within our culture. And we look forward to thinking about how the church can step into that place where there's great need.
I would also say, just because it's ill-defined on how this all can look, we've given some examples of how it has looked, but that kind of makes it an exciting venture if you just turn on that creativity and kind of approach this very flexibly. I think of like the body of Christ, we're all different parts, and each church is a different part of the body. Sort of trusting that you have something to offer, and listening really well to what that might be, and not coming in as like, hey, I have something to offer, but really humbly coming in and saying, like, how can I help? Like, how can I support the work that you guys are already doing here? And then listening really well. I think you'll be surprised at just the variety of different ideas that church leaders have with what they're seeing, with what their needs are. And it can be a really fun, as long as you don't need that cookie cutter approach, it can be a really fun project to just kind of get your feet wet in and see what works and see what doesn't. I mean, I've made hundreds of mistakes, and I love my mistakes because I really learn from them. And I think with the goal of supporting the church, even our blunders can be something everyone can kind of laugh at later. But I say, don't let fear limit. If this is what your heart wants to get into, I say, don't let fear limit you, and lean into others as needed. I know, there are some people doing these kinds of things around the country. Lean in, create a group, create your own group, join a group,
That's
but
great.
try to build your own little sense of community as you move forward.
That's great. You remind me of was at a conference on church growth back in the 1990s, I think, and very famous leader who was one of the leaders of the conference said, don't copy us, copy our process. Follow
Right,
and
Yeah.
find the answers that really work for your congregation. And I think
right.
that I thought that was actually really sound advice, because so many people
Mm.
just want to say, they're doing this, let's do that, and
Mhm.
it may not be right. And I really appreciate that. Thank you. Well, we want to give people a chance one more time to see where to pick up your book, and that information is already in the chat. Uh, but we've been talking about Beyond the Clinical Hour, which can be purchased from InterVarsity Press at 25% off with free shipping using the code IVPESN at checkout, which is good through May 22nd, and you can apply it to your whole order. There's also an option right now at InterVarsity Press. Any InterVarsity Press ebook can be ordered at Amazon for 50% off. And you can have it instantly on your reader. So both of those are good options to pursue. We invite you to consider those. Finally, I want to tell you about our next conversation. We're on June 12th, we're actually going to have an evening conversation. And one of our science writer for the Emerging Scholars Network, Andy Walsh, is going to be doing an interview with Drew Johnson, who has written a book called What Hath Darwin to Do with Scripture? It seems like we're still having conversations about the two. And Drew really goes beyond seeing these things in conflict to seeing both remarkable continuities and discontinuities between the Bible's concerns and those of Darwin and modern science. If that sounds interesting, that's on June 12th, 2024 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And there is a link in the chat where you can go and register today. So with that, we want to just thank everyone for being a part of this conversation. Amy and Jim, thank you so much for taking your time today to be with us. Thanks to all of those who have joined us live for being a part of the conversation. We'd like to acknowledge that InterVarsity Press has been of great assistance in helping set up these conversations. And so we want to express our appreciation to them. And we would like to invite you, if you're not already, to join the Emerging Scholars Network, which is the host for today's conversation. If you go to our blog.emergingscholars.org, you can sign up for free at that site. We have platforms on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Just go to @ESNIVCF. Also, this conversation and about 60 others are posted on our YouTube, or will be, this one will be, and 60 others are posted on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/ESNIVCF. And so we hope you'll join us there. So with that, we thank you for joining our conversation today, and hope you will come back next time and join us again.